The year was 1875 in the untamed territories of the American West, where justice rode on horseback and courage was measured by the draw of a gun. On a dusty trail winding through the canyonlands, a lone rider in a black mask guided his magnificent white stallion through the afternoon heat. The horse, known as Silver for his gleaming coat that shone like moonlight, suddenly pricked his ears and pawed the ground nervously. "Easy there, Silver," the masked rider whispered, his voice carrying the authority of a man who had seen too much injustice. "What is it, boy? You sense something I don't?" Silver whinnied softly and turned his head toward the distant hills, where the sound of gunshots and angry voices carried on the desert wind. The ranger, as he was known throughout the territory, had learned to trust Silver's instincts completely. In their 3 years together, the horse had never been wrong about danger. "Trouble ahead," the ranger murmured, adjusting his black hat and checking his gun belt. "Let's ride, Silver. Someone needs our help." Without hesitation, he spurred Silver forward, and they thundered toward the source of the trouble, dust clouds billowing behind them like a storm racing across the desert. At the Coleman Ranch, a scene of injustice was unfolding under the scorching sun. Sarah Coleman, a young woman of 22 with fiery red hair and determined green eyes, stood defiantly on her front porch before 5 armed men. Their leader, Deputy Hayes, was a corrupt lawman whose badge had been bought and paid for by the territory's most ruthless land grabber, Jack Morrison. "Now see here, Miss Coleman," Deputy Hayes drawled, his voice dripping with false politeness as he spat tobacco juice into the dust. "Your daddy owed Mr. Morrison a considerable sum of money. Since he ain't around to pay up, well, that debt falls to you." Sarah's hands clenched into fists at her sides. "That's a lie, and you know it. Papa paid every cent he owed. I saw the receipts myself." "Receipts?" Hayes laughed, a sound like gravel in a tin can. "Well, now that's mighty convenient. Too bad all them papers got burned up in that fire at the courthouse last week. Real tragedy that was." "You mean the fire you and Morrison started?" Sarah shot back, her voice trembling with rage rather than fear. "My father was an honest man who worked his fingers to the bone building this ranch. He didn't owe anybody anything." One of Hayes's men, a thin weasel of a man named Slade, stepped forward with a cruel grin. "Your daddy was honest, all right. Honest enough to get himself killed when he wouldn't listen to reason." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She had suspected her father's death in that horse accident hadn't been natural, but hearing it confirmed made her stomach turn. You murdered him." Now, Hayes said, holding up a hand in mock concern. "Nobody said nothing about murder. Accidents happen all the time out here. Horses spook, men fall, necks get broken. It's a dangerous world for folks who don't know how to cooperate." Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper filled with cold fury. "You're going to pay for what you did to Papa. Somehow, some way, you're going to pay." Hayes laughed again and gestured to his men. "Boys, I think Miss Coleman here needs to be taught some manners. Maybe a few days in town working at the saloon will help her understand her new situation." Just as Slade reached for Sarah's arm, the thundering of hooves announced the arrival of the ranger and Silver. The magnificent horse slid to a stop in a cloud of dust, and the ranger dismounted with fluid grace, his hand resting casually on the grip of his gun. "That's far enough, gentlemen," the ranger said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man who had faced down countless desperados. "I believe the lady asked you to leave." Deputy Hayes turned, his hand moving instinctively toward his gun before he caught sight of the mask and the confident bearing of the newcomer. Well, what do we have here? Some kind of play actor?" "I'm someone who doesn't like seeing innocent folks threatened," the ranger replied calmly. "Miss, are you hurt?" Sarah stared at the masked man in amazement. She had heard stories of a mysterious rider who appeared wherever justice was needed, but she had always thought they were just tales told around campfires. "No, I'm not hurt, but these men, they killed my father and now they're trying to steal our ranch." "Is that so?" The ranger's voice grew dangerously quiet. "And you suppose you have legal papers to back up your claim, deputy?" Hayes's face flushed red. "I don't need to show you nothing, stranger. This is official business." "Official business usually involves actual documents. Funny how yours seem to have gone up in smoke." Slade, emboldened by the fact that they outnumbered the newcomer, stepped forward with a sneer. "Listen here, masked man. There's 5 of us, and 1 of you. Maybe you ain't too good at counting." The ranger's hand moved slightly on his gun grip, and Silver stomped his hooves, sensing the tension. "I count just fine. The question is, are you fast enough to back up those numbers?" Before anyone could respond, another voice cut through the air. "What's the delay, Hayes? I thought I told you to have this matter settled by sundown." Jack Morrison rode up on a black stallion, his expensive clothes and silver-trimmed saddle marking him as a man of wealth and power. He was handsome in a cold, calculating way, with steel-gray eyes that missed nothing and a smile that never reached those eyes.
"Mr. Morrison," the ranger said, turning to face the newcomer, "your reputation precedes you, though I can't say any of what I've heard has been particularly flattering." Morrison's eyes narrowed as he studied the masked man. "Do I know you, stranger? That voice sounds familiar. You know what I stand for. Justice, honor, protection of the innocent. Concepts that seem to be foreign to you." Morrison laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Justice, honor, those are luxuries for men who can afford them. Out here, the only law is the law of the strong. The weak get what they deserve." "My father wasn't weak," Sarah interjected, stepping forward despite the danger. "He was 10 times the man you'll ever be, Morrison. He built this ranch with his own hands, raised cattle, hired local men, contributed to the community. What have you ever done except steal and kill?" Morrison's face darkened. "Your father was a fool, girl. I offered to buy him out fair and square. He could have taken the money and moved on. Instead, he chose to be stubborn. Some choices have consequences." "You mean like the choice to have him killed?" Sarah's voice was steady now, filled with righteous anger. "Or the choice to burn down the courthouse to destroy the evidence of his payments?" "Careful, Miss Coleman. Making accusations without proof can be dangerous. Almost as dangerous as riding alone on dark nights when accidents are so common." The ranger's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Mr. Morrison, I'm going to give you one chance to ride away from here. Take your men and go. Don't come back." Morrison's hand moved to his gun. "I think not. Hayes, take care of our masked friend here, and make sure the girl doesn't cause any more trouble." "Draw, stranger," Hayes shouted, going for his gun. The ranger's hand moved like lightning, his pistol clearing leather and firing before Hayes had even fully drawn his weapon. The deputy's gun went flying, and he clutched his wounded hand, crying out in pain. "Anyone else want to try their luck?" the ranger asked calmly, his smoking gun still trained on the group. 2 of Morrison's men started to reach for their weapons, but Silver suddenly reared up on his hind legs, striking the air with his hoofs and letting out a fierce whinny that spooked their horses. In the confusion, the ranger fired 2 more shots, disarming both men without seriously injuring them. Slade, the last of the hired guns, threw down his weapon and raised his hands. "I ain't getting paid enough for this." Morrison's face was purple with rage. "You cowards, there's still 4 of us." "3, Slade corrected, already backing toward his horse. "I quit." "Make that 2, said one of the other men, nursing his wounded hand. "I'm with Slade." Morrison looked at Hayes, who was still groaning over his injured hand. "Fine, but this isn't over, whoever you are." The ranger holstered his gun, but kept his hand near it. "No, it isn't. Miss Coleman deserves justice for her father's death, and this community deserves to be free from your reign of terror." Morrison's eyes glittered with malice. "You have no idea who you're dealing with, masked man. I own this territory, the sheriff, the judge, half the businessmen in town. You're just one man." "One man can make a difference," the ranger replied quietly, "especially when he's fighting for what's right." Sarah stepped forward, her voice strong and clear. "And he's not alone. There are other honest people in this territory who are tired of living in fear, people who remember what my father stood for." Morrison's smile was cold as winter. "We'll see about that, those of you. But mark my words, this is far from over. I've built my empire on the bones of men who thought they could stand against me. You'll join them soon enough." He wheeled his horse around and rode off, followed by Hayes and the remaining hired guns. Slade had already disappeared over the ridge, and the ranger made a mental note that the man might be useful later if he could be convinced to testify against Morrison. When the dust settled, Sarah turned to her mysterious rescuer. "Who are you? Why are you helping us?" The ranger was quiet for a long moment, stroking Silver's neck as he considered his answer. "Let's just say I have a score to settle with men like Morrison. I've seen too many good people crushed under the boot of corruption and greed." "But there must be more to it than that," Sarah pressed. "The way Morrison looked at you, like he almost recognized you. Do you know him from somewhere?" The ranger's jaw tightened beneath the mask. "Morrison and I have history, but that's not important right now. What matters is keeping you safe and making sure your father's death is avenged." Sarah studied his face, or what she could see of it beneath the mask. "You're not just some drifter who happened to be passing by, are you? You came here specifically because of Morrison." Silver whinnied softly and nuzzled the ranger's shoulder, as if sensing his master's inner turmoil. The ranger patted the horse's neck absently, his mind clearly elsewhere.
The ranger was quiet for so long that Sarah thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with old pain. "My brother, Tom, was a Texas Ranger, the best lawman I ever knew. He was investigating Morrison's land-grabbing operation, getting close to exposing the whole corrupt network. Morrison invited him to a meeting, claimed he wanted to make a deal. Tom went because he believed in giving everyone a chance to do the right thing." Sarah's hand went to her throat. "Oh, God, what happened?" "They found Tom's body in a ravine the next morning. Morrison claimed he'd been drinking and fell from his horse, but Tom never touched liquor, and he was the best horseman in Texas. It was murder, plain and simple." "Why didn't you go to the law?" The ranger's laugh was bitter. "What law? Morrison owned the sheriff, the judge, even the newspaper editor. Anyone who spoke against him either ended up dead or run out of town. So I decided to become the law. I put on this mask and started following Morrison's trail, helping the people he was trying to destroy." Silver stamped his hooves and looked toward the horizon where the sun was beginning to set. The ranger took the hint and turned to Sarah. "Miss Coleman, you can't stay here. Morrison will be back, and next time he'll bring more men. Do you have somewhere safe you can go?" Sarah's shoulders sagged. "I have a cousin in Denver, but I can't just abandon the ranch. This is my home. It's all I have left of Papa." "The ranch will still be here when Morrison is brought to justice," the ranger said gently. "But if you're dead, it won't matter who owns it." "What about you? Where will you go?" The ranger swung up into Silver's saddle, his movements fluid and practiced. "Silver and I have work to do. Morrison's gotten too comfortable, too confident. It's time to remind him that his actions have consequences." "Be careful," Sarah said, surprising herself with how much she cared about this mysterious stranger. "Morrison's not just ruthless, he's smart, and he has resources you don't." The ranger touched the brim of his hat in a gesture of respect. "I have something he doesn't, Miss Coleman. I have right on my side, and I have Silver here who's worth 10 of Morrison's hired guns." As if in response, Silver whinnied proudly and pawed the ground, ready for action. "Besides," the ranger continued, "Morrison made one mistake today. He admitted, in front of witnesses, that he was responsible for your father's death. That's not something the good people of this territory will forget."
Sarah watched as the Ranger and Silver rode toward the sunset, their silhouettes growing smaller against the vast expanse of the desert. She knew she would probably never see the masked man again, but she also knew that as long as there were people like him in the world, there was hope for justice. The Ranger rode through the night, his mind working on a plan to bring down Morrison once and for all. He had learned patience in his 3 years of pursuing his brother's killer, but he had also learned that sometimes justice required more than just catching the guilty. It required exposing the entire corrupt system that allowed men like Morrison to thrive. As the stars appeared in the darkening sky, Silver's hooves drummed a steady rhythm on the hard-packed earth. The Ranger knew that Morrison's defeat was only the beginning. There would always be men like him, seeking to profit from others' misery, and there would always be a need for someone to stand against them. But as long as he had Silver beside him, and as long as there were people like Sarah Coleman willing to fight for what was right, he would never ride alone in that fight. The legend of the Ranger and his Silver Stallion would continue, adding new chapters to the ongoing story of justice in the American West. The next morning would bring new challenges, new dangers, and new opportunities to make a difference. But for now, under the star-filled sky, a masked rider and his faithful horse rode on, carrying hope to all who had been forgotten by the law.